This month on Focus Black Oklahoma, join us as we highlight high school counselors who help students facing the complexities of college admission and financial aid.
Learn about 2 Oklahoma realtors who help indigenous people utilize programs through the federal government and tribal nations to bring land and homeownership to Native American families.
Explore the Beyond Apology report released in early 2024, which opens dialogue on the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, emphasizing the need for reparative justice.
Understand more about retinoblastoma, a rare childhood cancer that affects the retina.
And take a journey with a much younger Sandra Slade to her grandparents' home in Shakota for a summer full of fun and Arthur? All this and more on Focus Black Oklahoma.
Focus Black Oklahoma is sponsored by Phillips Seminary's exhibition of Veins of Oklahoma, featuring the fiber art of Taylor Painter Wolf through April 5th on its Tulsa campus. Learn more at wherefaithleads.com.
This is Focus Black Oklahoma. I'm Kuma Roberts.
And I'm Jacob Littlebear.
The free application for Federal Student Aid Program, or FAFSA, is undergoing significant changes, resulting in a critical need for college counselors. High school counselors help navigate changes which are vital for students facing the complexities of college admission and financial aid. Anthony Cherry highlights the role of knowledgeable counselors in the FAFSA process.
Unfortunately, high-quality college counselors do not grow abundantly on trees. To receive timely and meaningful life and career guidance from a passionate, experienced college counselor at a high school level is truly a blessing. Across all schools in the United States, the average student-to-school counselor ratio is 464 to 1, according to the American School Counselor Association. Nearly 1 in 5 students, about 8 million children, do not have access to a counselor in their schools at all, and nearly 3 million of those students do not even have access to other school support staff, such as school psychologists or social workers. Oklahoma's student-to-counselor ratio was 398 to 1 at the end of the last school year, while the American School Counselor Association recommends 250 to 1. One might even call access to a counselor a privilege. A good guidance counselor has the inherent power to significantly impact the overall quality of a student's life post-graduation. With the cloud of uncertainty surrounding changes of the 2024-2025 FAFSA, or Free Application for Federal Student Aid, knowledgeable practitioners are invaluable to Oklahoma high schools. Jennifer Sack is the lead counselor at Booker T. Washington High School in Tulsa. She currently holds the honor of Oklahoma State School Counselor of the Year. She advanced to become one of the 5 finalists considered by the American School Counselor Association for the National School Counselor of the Year.
I think a lot of just the stress and the frenzy around the whole college admission process. I mean, that's something every year that I just get really concerned about with kids and families and mental health of kids when I see them so stressed out, because really, I just wish they could walk that back a little bit and realize that you don't need to be that worried about it. I mean, yes, it can be stressful, but not to the point where you should be feeling, unhealthy about it. And if it's getting to that point for you, then let's look at your situation and maybe what are we doing that we could maybe get under some better control.
SAC has won local as well as national recognition for her counseling skill set, while helping more students plan successful post-high school livelihoods and careers.
Let's be intentional. I think there's a lot of room there to walk back some of that stress and angst for kids and for parents and take some of the frenzy out of it.
In school counseling, we deal primarily in 3 areas: the academic, the social, emotional, as well as the post-secondary or college and career. And I would say that I do spend a large part of my time in the academic area, and I've had to learn a lot in what it takes for students to graduate and how to really help them get through that process, because some are harder than others to get through to graduation.
That was Erica Walker, the lead counselor at Will Rogers College High School in Tulsa. Will Rogers High School has a special program that allows their seniors to graduate with an associate's degree, which is a 2-year college degree that you can obtain from a community college, junior college, online university, or some 4-year institutions. In terms of educational attainment, an associate's degree falls between a high school diploma and a bachelor's degree. Her expertise has evolved over the years as she has helped many of her students get ahead in the game of life.
In my particular area, I've worked with majority seniors. And what's been a little bit more difficult for me is when we have students that miss credits before they get to senior year. That makes it a little bit more difficult when they become seniors. And I find out that there is a credit they were missing from freshman year. That makes it a little bit harder. And so over the years, I'm really working towards working with a team of counselors in my building so that we could start identifying some of these issues sooner and taking care of them, and we're not waiting until senior year.
Having a positive relationship with a skilled strategist and tactician such as Walker is something from which every junior and senior could benefit.
One of the things I think about is, and something that's been difficult for me to do, is just making sure our students have a plan. And I think about what you were saying about students applying to the colleges. I'm also thinking making sure they're applying to not only the right fit, but if you know what major you want, then you definitely want to choose that university that focuses on that major, which is a popular major, and not go to a school or not thinking you're going to apply to this school, but they don't even have the major that you're planning to take.
SAC adds to Walker's point.
There were missed opportunities along the way to get a kid on track. And there's a reason there's other plans out there. And so that's the job of your school counselor, is to help you get a plan in place, whatever that plan is that's right for you. And when kids ask me, what's the best university or what's the best plan? Well, there isn't a best. It's what's best for you.
Oklahoma's Promise is a state-funded program that pays a student's full tuition to attend a 2-year college or 4-year university if their family earns $60,000 or less. In order for a student to qualify for Oklahoma's Promise, they must be an Oklahoma resident and enrolled in 8th, 9th, 10th, or 11th grade in an Oklahoma high school. SAC explains more.
I think with Oklahoma Promise, that's a huge game changer, I think, for Oklahoma students, just that money that is available through the state for kids to go to college in Oklahoma, but it is a scholarship. And so that's part of the conversation with kids too, is you've got some onus in the process here. You've got to keep your grades up and have a certain grade point average, have good attendance, do your homework. There's a commitment there, but there is that free money to help you go to college if you can, keep that commitment level up.
Walker also encourages her students to pursue every possible avenue for a brighter future.
So just making sure that they are aware of those options. And I wish students would also continue to understand what other opportunities that are out there, because there are several universities in Oklahoma that, in addition to Oklahoma's Promise, they will put in something that will cover fees or even cover their room and meal plans.
Jennifer Sack explains that the anticipated individualized changes to the FAFSA are still not 100% clear to everyone.
I think we're all just kind of in this waiting game together as far as seeing what the changes actually look like. Several years ago when I started, the FAFSA didn't open until December. So that's not unheard of, and that's not completely uncharted territory.
Erica Walker is preparing her students the best she's able, regardless of the uncertainty.
I am waiting as well to hear about the changes, but we have also started our students, or helping them get started with creating their FSA IDs so that when it does open, they'll be ready to go right in. One of the challenges that I see on our part is the amount of time we're going to have to get as many students through the FAFSA. When the FAFSA window opened up in October, we were able to really get started and get going. And there has been a push in our district to get as many students as we can to get the FAFSA completed.
The FAFSA will become more important to every student, not just those who are college bound, SAC explains.
I mean, there's just all these questions that we're unsure about. So I'm not sure if it's going to affect amounts that students are offered compared to under the previous system, but it'll be interesting to see how much that's impacted. And, in our state, completing the FAFSA is getting ready to be a graduation requirement. That's another thing that's coming down the pike. I believe next year starts with that graduating class that they want all seniors to have completed the FAFSA, which there's all kinds of questions around that.
Uncertainty has always been part of the life of a high school senior. Starting next year, however, there's a little more for seniors to consider as they plan their next stage of the life cycle. SAC offers advice for Oklahoma students.
And it's not just about getting in, but about where are you going? And that's the focus I try to keep it with my kids is that, your application online is not an Amazon cart. Let's not just keep adding schools and adding schools and adding schools because you're panicking about not getting in someplace. Maybe get under some better control. Are we over applying to too many schools? Are we not really being intentional about the process where we're just throwing applications out there without really being considerate of what the requirements are to go to that college, or why are you even wanting to apply there? I want it to be places that you want to go, and I want you to be happy where you end up.
Oklahoma ranks 43rd in the nation when it comes to educational attainment, making Oklahoma one of the least educated states in the union. Despite this dismal statistic, Jennifer Sack and Erica Walker continue their pursuit of mastery in their field despite overwhelming challenges. Sack speaks on broader staffing issues facing Oklahoma schools.
To spend more time with each kid, whether it's on college or all of the preparedness happening between 9th and 11th grade to get there. I think that's a big deal, and just trying to get more counselors in our schools so that counselors can spend more individual time with them. And that's a really critical piece in that college advising process too, to be able to spend time with you, whether it's filling out your applications or reviewing your essays or helping you just get things submitted.
The 2024-2025 FAFSA will include a number of anticipated changes families should brace themselves for. According to Paul Martin, a writer for the online periodical College Money Method, families with multiple children in college at the same time will see an increase in their student aid index over the previous year's calculations, reducing their eligibility for financial aid. Families who report a value to a business or any size farm will also see a decrease in their aid eligibility. Other significant changes are in store that will either positively affect or impede students' access to affordable higher education. Access to a high-quality education continues to be an issue of equity. To learn more on the potential impact these changes may have on financial aid eligibility, visit the Department of Education's website, studentaid.gov, or follow Paul Martin at collegemoneymethod.com. For Focus, Black Oklahoma, I'm Anthony Cherry in Tulsa.
The Beyond Apology report, released in early 2024, opens dialogue on the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, fostering community engagement and emphasizing the need for reparative justice. These discussions and the resulting recommendations aim to collectively shape a more equitable future for Black Tulsans, acknowledging past injustices while seeking tangible solutions for healing and reparations. Carlos Moreno has details.
Almost 3 years after the centennial of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, the city of Tulsa has taken one step closer to addressing reparations for the harm caused in part by the city government. On June 2nd, 2021, the Tulsa City Council passed Resolution 20113, which called for the city as a municipal entity to, quote, acknowledge, apologize, and commit to making tangible amends for the racially motivated acts of violence perpetrated against Black Tulsans in Greenwood in 1921, end quote. The resolution was approved by Tulsa Mayor G.T. Bynum on June 9th, 2021, committing to a community-led process to evaluate the recommendations of the Tulsa Race Riot Commission report, published in 2001 by the state of Oklahoma. The city's resolution also commits to report progress to Tulsa citizens every 2 years. Standpipe Hill Strategies, World One Development, and the Public Work Project at Oklahoma State University, Tulsa, led a series of community discussions around reparations between April and July 2023. This process was called Beyond Apology, and a new report, released in February of this year, contains the reparations research that has been done thus far, as well as community perspectives. Greg Robinson of Standpipe Hill Strategies speaks to the City of Tulsa's commitment to this community-led process.
It was from the impetus of that 2021 council resolution in which they stated that they wanted to understand where the community wanted them to start, right? They committed to doing something around the harm. And then they said, but we want to know where to start. And so that is why we essentially created this process. And so the relationship with the city hasn't been one where this is a sponsored, right, initiative. It's not as if it is a city initiative for sure, but it has been one where we have kept them involved, engaged, and where at least some of the city officials have participated. And I think it bodes well for the potential of what's to come.
Robinson makes it clear that the Beyond Apology process and its final report, while not funded by the City of Tulsa, nonetheless has provided a clear snapshot of Tulsa citizens' feedback and priorities. The report also serves to educate the public about the massacre in order to invite more community dialogue.
We weren't necessarily trying to impart our ferocity on anyone. We were trying to educate about the issue, and we weren't trying to force anyone to have a certain belief necessarily or to say anything. Many people just came to the meetings, got more educated, were able to learn from experts, and were able to reflect. And that, for us, was a goal of the process, because when you understand that there are additional steps that need to take place, it's going to essentially be an increasingly larger and larger community conversation that goes on if a reparations plan is ever to actually be implemented.
Robinson spoke to a large group gathered on February 8th at the 36th Street North Event Center to hear the findings from the Beyond Apology report, ask questions, and share feedback. He shared the report's one recommendation.
We recommend that the City of Tulsa establish a government-sanctioned task force or commission to establish and implement the terms of a reparations program. The scope should at the very least include survivors and descendants of the Tulsa Race Massacre and Black Tulsans who have been impacted by discriminatory policies and practices. Furthermore, the makeup of the above-mentioned task force or commission should ensure overwhelming representation from the communities most impacted by the harm. Finally, the reparations program must be differentiated from equitable policy. While the City of Tulsa should strive to enact equitable policy, the matter of reparations and any ensuing program exists to remedy past harms done to a specific group of people. In this case, that is the over 100 years of harm done to Black Tulsans in the wake of the 1921 Race Massacre.
Following the format of last year's Beyond Apology discussions, the majority of this community meeting invited participants to offer feedback. Ms. Bernice Alexander expressed her frustration that she and her husband have been advocates to improve North Tulsa for over 30 years.
That is happening in North Tulsa to our kids in these schools, to our neighborhoods, to us, is being done intentionally. I call it a criminal enterprise. They're up here locking up these kids and doing all kinds of things, and they are robbing this community. They rob this community, and they have continued to rob this community. And we have continued to show up at that council every week saying we're going to have to be accountable because payday is coming. You're going to remedy this situation in Tulsa, Oklahoma with this community. The whole community is involved.
One of the more interesting aspects of the Beyond Apology report is the broad geographic and demographic diversity of the Tulsa residents who have attended the meetings and provided their support for the idea of reparations. According to the report, Data was collected from 70% of zip codes in Tulsa and from every city council district. One attendee, a young white woman who lives in Midtown whose first name is Elizabeth, expressed her support for reparations.
Whatever the affected communities, like both North Tulsa and, of course, like the descendants, like whatever they prioritize or think would be the most meaningful in their lives, like that's where I want some of my taxpayer dollars to go into funding those initiatives. And I mean, based on the report today, we can clearly see what some of those priorities are, right? Like education, and there's some things around like housing and direct financial payments. And so whatever that community recognized need is by the affected demographic, that's who should make those kind of decisions.
Closing the evening was City Councilor Vanessa Hall Harper, who expressed her hope that Tulsans would remain engaged in the conversation around reparations and reminded the audience that 2024 is an election year.
I can't promise that this is what we're going to do. This is how this is going to happen, and this is the end result. I can't say that because I am one of 9 city councilors and a mayor. I know we have some support. I will say that. But what that's going to look like, who knows? But that's why it's so important for the community to stay engaged. Not only in this process, it's important for you to vote. I know for a fact that everybody in here doesn't live in District 1, right? And so wherever you live and whoever your representatives are, we need you to be that voice behind them to say there's work going on to right or wrong. What is your position on it? Call them to account and say, you will not have my support unless you're doing this work.
To read the Beyond Apology report, as well as the associated community resources and study materials, visit beyondapology.org. For Focus Black Oklahoma, I'm Carlos Moreno in Tulsa.
You're listening to Focus Black Oklahoma. In the U.S., homeownership is the largest driver of wealth creation for families. Yet homeownership rates for Native Americans lag 15% behind their white American counterparts. 2 Oklahoma realtors are devoting their careers to helping indigenous people utilize programs through the federal government and tribal nations to close the gap. Here's Shonda Little.
On March 10th, 2024, the 96th Academy Awards will be held at the Dolby Theater in Los Angeles. Killers of the Flower Moon, a Martin Scorsese epic based upon a series of true crime murders that occurred in the Osage Nation in the 1920s, is nominated for 10 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Lead Actress. Lily Gladstone has already made history as the first Native American to win a Golden Globe and first Native American woman to receive a Best Actress nod. The story takes a dive into the infamous reign of terror inflicted upon the Osage people by a corrupt political crime boss determined to dispossess the Native families of their land and their rights to the oil and gas under their land. According to the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies, 56.7% of Native American households own their homes nationally. That statistic is 15 percentage points lower than white households. While the Scorsese movie has opened the American public's eyes to a long-forgotten violent plot committed to steal property ownership from Osage people, Oklahoma realtors Cori Taber and Ashley Daly both say great gains need to be made to restore land and home ownership to proper percentages for indigenous people. Tabor is a 2S LGBTQI woman, descendant of 3 tribes, the Osage, Muskogee Creek, and Cherokee. And Daly is a Latina woman married to an Osage man. Both are utilizing programs through the federal government and sovereign tribal nations to help Native Americans own homes. Both also say the lack of awareness of these programs is creating a barrier.
My name is Cori Taber, and I'm a realtor in Arizona and Oklahoma. I descend from the Muskogee Creek, Cherokee, and Osage nations of Oklahoma. I'm also a descendant of slaves, and I'm part white. So I'm a multiracial, 6th-generation Oklahoman with a very Ogie background.
Tabor's career into real estate occurred by happenstance when she bought her first home and realized the power of utilizing federal programs to achieve that goal.
I first became interested in real estate when I purchased my first house in 2002 in Phoenix, Arizona. And that wasn't something that I thought I would initially pursue as a career. It wasn't until many years later that I changed careers and became a realtor. And one of the many things that I think is especially important about the role of a realtor in society is the advocacy that we provide. I think that realtors have the ability to be an especially relevant and important advocate for the clients that we serve.
Because Tabor realized that she likely could not have accessed home ownership without a federal program, she became passionate about helping others do the same. She says she related to poor and working class indigenous families who wouldn't have had access to buying homes without these programs. According to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, the Section 184 Indian Home Loan Guarantee Program is a home mortgage product specifically designed for American Indian and Alaska Native families, Alaska villages, tribes, or tribally designated housing entities, end quote. HUD adds, quote, with Section 184 financing, borrowers can get into a home with a low down payment and flexible underwriting. Section 184 can be used both on and off native lands for new construction, rehabilitation, purchase of an existing home, or refinance. Section 184 is synonymous with home ownership in Indian country, end quote. However, Tabor notes that Section 184 doesn't work for many potential Native American applicants. She encourages clients to explore other options.
And why people like it is because in most FHA loan programs, you have to have a 3% down payment. It's called skin in the game, right? We want you to be able to produce some sort of deposit, generally 3%, to buy a home. And so most people think that it's 20%, and that's a common misconception, but it's not the case. Generally speaking, the number is 3% minimum. And then on top of that, the FHA Section 184 home loan reduces that number to 2.25%. So it's a lower barrier of entry, which is why it might be especially advantageous. Now, the other thing that I tell all of my Native American potential homeowner clients is that that may not be the best program for you, depending on the type of property that you're trying to buy. And unfortunately, it is not available coast to coast, north to south. The sad reality is that it's only available in certain states, and in some states, only certain counties.
So my name is Ashley Daly, and I have worked in Northeast Oklahoma in real estate for the last 14 years. I was fortunate enough to grow up in Osage County on the Osage Nation Reservation. So a lot of my friends were Osage, as I was one of the only Latina girls.
Through Daly's knowledge in real estate and programs to assist indigenous communities, she urges interested people to speak to their tribal nation's housing authorities for programs that might be better suited to their situation.
We help about 80 families a year, 80 buyers and sellers. And that varies. It ranges 80 to 100. I mean, every year's different. And it's all here in the Northeast Oklahoma area. We do help a majority of first-time home buyers and people of color. Last year, our clients received about $112,000 from tribal communities and down payment assistance. And almost all of our buyers will use some kind of government-backed loan to purchase.
Daly understands the importance of land and home ownership for indigenous people. Before she married her husband Amos, she first served as his realtor. Like Tabor, she believes HUD's Section 184 is a great program for those who qualify, but acknowledges many don't and other programs should be sought.
The federal programs that are available to Native home buyers are far and wide. And I always say none of them are created equally. You know, it goes beyond, we've got the Section 184 loan, okay? And, while we're talking about the Section 184 loan, I can't talk about it without highlighting the fact that So many Native clients cannot qualify for this loan. And here's why. Yes, it is beneficial. 2.25% down is wonderful. They have upped the minimum finance amount to close to $400,000, which definitely helps. And, you pay less points on the loan. The loan is a more favorable loan. But let's talk about the other side where you can have no late payments in the last year. All of your collections have to be paid for. And not only that, they want to see a history of trade lines, like you have insurance in your name, you have a phone bill in your name, all of that. And they do have a credit score requirement.
Daly says every sovereign tribal nation offers a different amount for down payment assistance. For example, the Osage Nation will provide members up to $5,500. The Creek and Otos may grant up to $6,000. Some require members to buy within the boundaries of their reservations, whereas other tribes support the purchasing of land and homes anywhere. She has even seen the Cherokee Nation provide up to $20,000 in assistance.
And so it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Both Tabor and Daly tout the importance that early home ownership has to generational wealth building and the freedom that comes with equity and property ownership. More importantly, Daly says it gives practical means to the land back movement. Ashley Daly explains.
The land back movement it's mainly about land sovereignty, having control over your own lands. And, a lot of people are living on their native lands, but they don't own a piece of it, right? Not a lot, not an acre, not an inch. And so it's really been my mission and, my real estate business. And when I do have a closing with somebody buying on their reservation, I always do use the hashtag, land back, because it's near and dear to me because of my husband and helping him take back some of his native lands. And then, the Osage people who I love and live with and I'm immersed with, and I've helped so many of them buy on Osage lands. And the beauty and also tragedy of Oklahoma is that we are an abstract state. So when someone does close on a property here, even though this is not commonplace, I urge my clients to hold their own abstracts in a very safe place, because that's the history of the land. And it goes back to the allotment. So we get to read what happened. We get to read, this land was allotted to this person, a lottee number, typically they got 160 acres. And then we also see how they dismantled that land through guardians who came in, that were assigned by the government to come in and manage the people and their land and their monies. And they systematically took their land away. So when you read those stories and you have access to those abstracts, I don't see how any person with a heart couldn't make it their mission to be like, look, I want to put the hands back into the people, back into these native people that are living on these lands that don't own their own land anymore.
For Focus, Black Oklahoma, I'm Shonda Little in the Cheyenne Arapaho Nation in Cheyenne, Oklahoma.
Retinoblastoma, a rare but aggressive eye cancer affecting children, challenges the way cells develop in the retina. Treatment options hinge on early detection, which creates disparities in health outcomes in lower socioeconomic populations with limited access to healthcare. Zakira Muhammad has more.
Marissa Gonzalez, president of the U.S. chapter of World Eye Cancer Hope, and a bilateral retinoblastoma survivor, explained that retinoblastoma is a childhood eye condition that has a complex genetic basis, which can be detected by a white or yellow glow in one or both of the pupils.
Yes. I was diagnosed at 17 months with bilateral retinoblastoma, so cancer of the retina in both eyes. My mother had previously taken me to a pediatrician because she noticed a white glow in the eye, which is a very, very telltale sign of retinoblastoma. And the pediatrician said, not to worry, you're being overprotective. But she knew as a mom in her gut that something was wrong. So I was eventually diagnosed at age 17 months and treated with radiation and cryotherapy. And ultimately, my left eye was removed just before my second birthday. And then I continued with surgeries for another 10 years.
Melissa Mills, a part-time genetic counselor at Lucille Packard Children's Hospital at Stanford University, shares her personal journey as a bilateral retinoblastoma survivor, emphasizing the significance of genetic counseling. Melissa was able to identify her specific genetic mutation, leading to genetic testing for her immediate family. This ultimately helped them understand the hereditary nature of the condition, providing valuable insights for the future health decisions of their loved ones.
I am a bilateral retinoblastoma survivor. I was diagnosed at 13 months old. I had a nucleation of my left and a bunch of cryotherapy in my right. I went to a genetic counselor and decided, oh my goodness, I need to do this and give back and help other folks understand the genetics of retinoblastoma and other genetic conditions.
Mills elaborates on the specific genetic factors associated with retinoblastoma and highlight the importance of genetic counseling and how it empowers individuals to make informed choices about their health. She emphasizes that genetic information can be utilized to create personalized plans for a healthier future.
I went to Stanford and saw a genetic counselor there who forever changed my life because she inspired me to decide to do a different career. But I went through that and was able to find my genetic mutation. And I was able to use that report that I got from my genetic counseling and my genetic testing and send it back east to where my family lived. And my mom got tested and my brother got tested. We were able to show that I was what's called a de novo case.
Dr. Jesse Berry of Children's Hospital Los Angeles and the Roski Eye Institute, also in LA, emphasized the importance of understanding the germline heritability of the retinoblastoma mutation, which is also called de novo.
And when that mutation is in all cells of the body, it predisposes the development of these cancerous tumors in the eye. That's the reason in that setting, children can have disease in both eyes. So if you see disease in both eyes, that gives you a lot of information about the heritability of the retinoblastoma for that child. However, even when the disease is unilateral, it's very important that you check the blood for the evidence of that retinoblastoma mutation, because about 15% of the time, that mutation is there. And it's very important to recognize it. This is a soapbox for me a little bit because I've taken care of many families where the adult had unilateral disease and they were told by doctors, you can't pass retinoblastoma on, you only had disease in one eye. Well, that's not true. 15% of patients with disease in one eye still have the mutation in their body and they can pass that mutation on to their children. And so, of course, I'm now taking care of their children and they're doing great, which is wonderful, but the parents really wish that they had been counseled appropriately. So it is very important that you check the blood for the mutation in any patient with disease just in one eye.
Dr. Berry highlights that while bilateral retinoblastoma affecting both eyes indicates a higher likelihood of heritability, even unilateral cases should be thoroughly examined for the presence of the retinoblastoma mutation. Dr. Berry warns against misconceptions, as some patients with disease in one eye can still carry the mutation and pass it on to their children. Melissa Mills enlightens us about the RB1 gene located on chromosome 13. She clarifies that ideally we inherit one chromosome 13 from each parent. However, outliers exist in medicine and genetic testing should be considered for accurate diagnosis.
We have 23 pairs of chromosomes, and the first 22 are the same in men and women. And the retinoblastoma-related gene called the RB1 gene is located on chromosome 13. And we have one from our mom, one chromosome 13 from our mom, and one from our dad. Ideally. And I mean by ideally is like there's always the outliers in medicine, but we have one from our mom, one from our dad.
Mill discusses the importance of genetic counseling.
Best part about cancer genetic counseling is that a lot of times we feel like we can use that information and be empowered by that information. So if you find out that there's something that you are carrying, there are things you can do to keep yourself healthy. We can make a plan together, things like that. So I love the piece where we can take our genetic information and make better decisions for our health going forward.
Marissa Gonzalez advised parents seeking genetic testing for themselves and their children to start with their child's primary care physician. They can then be referred to a genetic counselor or a cancer survivorship program. By sharing their child's medical history and going over their records, the genetic counselor can guide them through the testing process and provide valuable insights for the family's overall health.
If parents are looking to get genetic testing for themselves and for their child, they should start with their child's doctor, be that an ocular oncologist, an ophthalmologist, depending on what stage their child is at, and ask to be referred to a genetic counselor or a cancer survivorship program. And once they meet with a genetic counselor, then they can explain their child's history, they'll go over their medical records, and then the genetic counselor will advise, who in the family needs to be tested. Do the parents need to be tested? Do their siblings need to be tested?
Dr. Jessie Berry emphasizes,
if they had a test 15, 16, 17 years ago, and it was negative, I still recommend that test be done again before they have at detecting particularly low-level mutations than we ever have been before.
By understanding the genetic difference between hereditary and non-hereditary forms of retinoblastoma, individuals can make informed decisions about their health, and families can take proactive measures to navigate this condition. Marissa Gonzalez provides resources that offer support with understanding the RB1 gene, genetic counseling, and more.
The World Eye Cancer Hope website, which is WE, the letter C, and the word hope.org, is an absolute plethora of information on everything relating to retinoblastoma, from finding a treatment center around the world to ocularists, who are people that make prosthetic eyes. There is also a wealth of information about genetics, about survivorship programs, about what it means to be in a survivorship program, and a lot of blogs that specifically do deal with genetics.
For Focus, Black Oklahoma, I'm Jakir Muhammad in Tulsa.
Would you like to pitch a story to FBO?
Or work with us as a correspondent?
Please email us at contact@focusblackoklahoma.com. In Shakota, summers with Sandra Slade's grandparents were filled with laughter, life lessons, and a humorous mix-up about Arthur. This tale encapsulates the essence of childhood innocence, the strength of family bonds, and the enduring love that weaves through generations.
My grandparents were married for over 45 years. I've always admired their love for each other. My grandfather, Abe, was not much of a talker, the strong, silent type. My grandmother, Arizona, would speak with a smile in her voice. My grandfather would tell us how my grandmother would make you feel like you were standing directly in the warmth of the sun's rays, no matter what was going on. With both of them together, I always felt at ease, no cares, free to be me and be expressive. Every summer growing up, I spent time in Shakota with my grandparents and cousins. A wonderful mix of fresh fried chicken, picking wild onions, skipping rocks on the lake, riding horses, walking down dusty roads, and playing outside. I look forward to summer so that I could show off my city girl clothes, which would get dirty the first couple of days after getting there. My grandmother would tell my mom not to pack my fancy clothes because I was going to be playing and working. My mother would tell my grandmother, "Yes, ma'am," then glance over at me because I was the one that added my fancy clothes to my suitcase. Mornings, my grandmother would assist Monica and I in making drop biscuits with eggs we got from the hen house. My grandfather, Chiefy, and Chris would come in just as the last biscuit was being taken out the grease. As soon as he walked in the door, my grandfather would kiss my grandmother by her ear, and she would giggle, move away, and hit him with the towel she had flung over her shoulder. We would add some home fries to the breakfast spread, and then we all sat down to eat. The table was old and rickety, and our chairs were heavily worn, but big and comfortable. On occasion, we would have fried chicken with breakfast, but that was usually on special occasions. On those days, we got to lay in bed and be awakened by the sound of chicken frying and the smell of fluffy pancakes. Mmm, I can almost taste that. After breakfast, we would go sit on the porch, wave at folks passing by, snap peas, or braid dandelions. My grandfather would come by once Silver the horse was ready to be ridden and lean over the railing and say to Arizona, "You want to take these bones for a walk?" My grandmother would laugh, smile, look at Monica and I and say, "Abe, seems like both of those old bones are in need of some exercise." We would all laugh. Then my grandfather and my male cousins would go walk down to the neighbors, yelling back that they would be back before supper. As we got older, we spent less and less summers in Shakota. My grandparents got one of the neighbor kids to help out with the chores. When we asked my grandfather how was that going, my grandfather would say, "You know how people say help is where you find it?" Well, he thought, we should still be looking. One time, my Aunt Martha came to visit us and take us out to the new Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant that was in town. And she began telling us how it used to be her job to pick out one of the chickens for dinner. All of us looked at each other confused. My grandmother gave her a look and my aunt hushed, but it was too late. We were all intrigued. Since we were spending the night, we asked could we have eggs, biscuits, and chicken for breakfast. We all hardly slept a wink that night, and we got up and had our chores finished quickly. Monica had just dropped 2 biscuits into the grease when we heard a weird noise. I walked to the back door, and I dropped the biscuit in my hand to the floor. Monica yelled at me that I was going to be in trouble walking up to me. Monica gasped and dropped the wooden spoon. We stood looking in horror as it seemed like my grandmother was being attacked by a chicken. My cousins who were walking up stopped in their tracks. We all just stood there, just standing there looking. It seemed like she was wrestling a chicken. We couldn't tell if the chicken was winning or her. By the time my grandfather made it to her, there were feathers all over the place, and my grandmother's ponytail had become undone and hung in various ringlets around her face. In one swoop, my grandfather grabbed the chicken, then his axe came from nowhere and chopped the chicken's head. As he placed it in the steel tub, we could see the chicken flapping its arms. Chiefy went pale. Chris started to cry. Monica threw up on the back of the screen door, and I just stood there frozen. My grandmother wiped her hands on her apron, smoothed her hair back in place, grabbed the tub, and came in the house. She told Monica to clean out the screen, Chris to quit crying, Chiefy to go get some more milk, and advised me to finish getting the biscuits into the grease. As we did what she told us, she started plucking feathers. When we were done, she shooed us out to the front room to straighten up before our parents got back. As we sat down to eat breakfast, none of us kids took any chicken. We just looked at each other and watched our grandparents and parents smile, crunching, eating breakfast. Nah, we were done. I thought if my grandparents withstood that horror weekly, their love could withstand anything. As my grandparents were getting older, I remember standing on the other side of the door and hearing my grandmother talking to my aunt. That some guy named Arthur was coming to visit her, and she could feel him all over. I stood outside the door traumatized, thinking, how could she be seeing someone behind Granddad's back? I thought she loved Abe, plus she was always so busy. The next time I heard her talk about this Arthur person, we had just gotten into the car from going into town. My grandmother said Arthur was starting to get to her legs and she didn't think anything she could do to stop him from taking hold of her. Now, I was seriously getting worried that Arthur was trying to push Granddad out the picture. I looked out the window and silently hoped Arthur would leave Grandma alone. I was so worried that my grandmother was cheating, I often cried. My grandfather was her protector, and she should watch out because this man named Arthur was coming around and bothering Grandma. When I asked my mom about who Arthur was, she just looked at me and said not to eavesdrop on grown folks' conversation. Well, we were all going to Shakota to celebrate their anniversary. And I couldn't wait because I knew that I would be eating good food, fun with family, and time to collect some more memories. My grandmother looked so pretty with her hair in a knot and this delicate blue skirt she had on, nicely starched white shirt. And even though it was spring, she still had on her favorite light pink sweater. My grandfather's jeans were starched to perfection. His blue dress shirt was tucked in. Boy, did he look dapper. He even had a handkerchief in his pocket. Abe and Arizona basked in the glow of their children and grandchildren. We ate, played board games, ate more, and then it was time for cake. Monica and I were so excited because we were able to help make it and couldn't wait for the glowing reviews. My grandfather cut the cake and we went to feed my grandmother a piece. My grandmother smiled as she accepted the cake, and they stood there for a moment looking at each other, and then my grandmother went to sit down. As she lowered herself, she winced a bit and then said, "Oh, here come Arthur." Monica and I turned around because how dare he come here, and looked over at our grandfather who was helping my grandmother to the chair. Both Monica and I started crying. My Aunt Lou asked us what was wrong. I didn't want to say anything, but Monica said that grandmother was cheating on our grandfather and that she had invited this man. My aunt, now flanked by my other aunts, looked confused, then asked us who we were talking about. I shakily told them the man's name was Arthur, and grandmother said he had been coming around. In fact, he just showed up. My aunts looked at each other and started laughing. Monica and I were confused. Aunt Lou brings us over to grandmother and says, "Tell her what you just told us." We tell her, and my grandmother is confused. My grandfather is leaning in hard and looking. My aunt points to her arm, and then my grandmother laughs. She hugs us and tells us she would never cheat on my grandfather, and that he knows about Arthur also. Now we're really confused at this point. They hold hands, and my grandmother says, Arthur is short for arthritis. When she feels a pain in one of her joints, that is what she calls him. As she is telling us this, our whole family has gathered around and started laughing. Relieved to understand what was going on, Monica and I laughed and hugged our grandparents, taking care not to make it painful in case Arthur wanted to show up.
Thanks for joining us on Focus Black Oklahoma.
Focus Black Oklahoma is produced in partnership with KOSU Radio and Tri-City Collective. Additional support is provided by the Commemoration Fund. Our theme music is by Moffett Music. Focus Black Oklahoma's executive producers are Quraish Ali Lantana and Bracken Clark. Our associate producers are Smriti Iyengar and Jesse Ulrich. Our production intern is Daryl Turner. You can visit us online at kosu.org or focusblackoklahoma.com and on YouTube at Tri-City Collective. You can follow us on Instagram at FocusBlackOK and on Facebook at facebook.com/FocusBlackOK. You can hear Focus Black Oklahoma on demand for free at kosu.org, the NPR app, npr.org, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The KOSU Daily Podcast provides you with local news to get you on your way every Monday through Friday morning. The KOSU Daily includes stories from our state impact reporters looking into topics including healthcare and education. We'll also have reports on indigenous affairs in the state of Oklahoma, along with rural and agricultural issues. You can find the KOSU Daily wherever you get your podcasts or at kosu.org. The KOSU Daily, Oklahoma news, every weekday.